So today we're going to look at self-portraits, particularly using shape and shadow. So the first artist we're looking at today is Frida Kahlo, who is a Mexican artist, and she did a huge number of self-portraits, and they're quite stylized. She's always kind of very strong, looking to camera. She's recognizable by her kind of monobrow, and she portrays herself in a way that women aren't often portrayed in portraits, and definitely not in self-portraits. So they're quite strong, always looking straight to camera, and with lots of symbols around her. Here's a picture of her painting one of her self-portraits. So the second person we're looking at is Rembrandt, and Rembrandt painted huge numbers of self-portraits throughout his life. So these are, I think, roughly in chronological order. So you can see him from a young man, maybe to a man in his 20s, getting a little older. He was a very successful artist in his 30s, 40s, so he's quite kind of rich in some of these. And then as time went on, he didn't exactly become very poor, but he had less of a rich, wealthy lifestyle. So as time goes on, you can see him documenting his aging. In fact, you can see him documenting himself as he gets older. Sometimes he poses with his paints and his palette, and other times it's just him as a person. So we're going to look at drawing self-portraits, and the first thing we're going to look at is the shapes you can see in a face. So here's one of Frida Kahlo's portraits, and what I've done is I've broken that up into separate parts, so the eye, nose and mouth, and this handout is attached to the lesson here. You can print it out or work from screen, and we're going to try do some of these. So here I have my printout done, and what I'm going to do is just start looking at what shapes do I see when I'm looking at these parts. So all I've done is I've isolated. So isolating just means I've taken parts of the face and I'm just looking at them one at a time. Any kind of observational drawing, isolating out features or isolating out parts is what you need to naturally do. So here I've done it by kind of cutting out a bit and printing it out. But actually when you're looking at someone, you need to just concentrate on nearly one part at a time. And in doing so, you're isolating out the features a little bit like I have here. So first thing I'm doing is I'm looking at the shape of the eye. So the shape of the eye, I'm looking at the upper part of her eye, the lower part, and then the shapes inside. So I'm not only looking at what shape is the pupil, but what shape is the white of the eye? Where do all those parts fit in? And I'm kind of measuring as I draw. So even here where I'm drawing her eyelid, I'm kind of measuring how far from the lower part of the eyelid the upper part is. Is that high enough up? Do I need to change that shape? So within a face, there are lots of lines, but there are also lots and lots of shapes that you can draw. And all kinds of observational drawing benefits from looking at both shapes and lines that you can see. So you can see here, I'm trying to get the shape of the upper part of the eyelid more like my reference image. Okay, so my reference image is the picture on the left, and that's from the Frida Kahlo portrait, and the one on the right is me inside my box trying to replicate the shapes that I can see. Okay, so this is not an exercise in copying, it's more an exercise in kind of training you to look for the shapes. So by isolating out parts of this really famous portrait by Frida Kahlo, we're trying to train our eye to look more closely at the shapes we see. Even, you can see here, I'm shading in the shadow that appears on the inside of the eye there. Okay, so you're looking for shapes around the eye itself, maybe even in the eyebrows I'm drawing here, but also in the shadows that are appearing. So a shadow appears where it's kind of deeper, there's more depth at that part of the face. I'm just putting a little bit of shadow. One thing when you're drawing eyes is the two eyes aren't always the same shape. So keep in mind, one eye might be one shape, one eye might be another. So again, I'm doing a little bit of measuring like we did with our last lesson, and I'm just seeing how I can make the shape of this nose as close as possible to the one that I'm drawing from, which is Frida Kahlo's. So as I draw, I'm kind of measuring just to make sure everything fits in. So obviously when you're drawing a self-portrait, you can't always measure with your fingers, but you can if you want. Some people measure by holding their pencil up. And all I'm trying to do is to get the shape of that nose the same as the one that I'm looking at. Same here, I'm just measuring in to see where the side of the outer part of the nostril goes. One shape you will always find in face is nostrils. Unless someone's looking very far down and you can't see the nostril, often from the front you can see a nostril shape. So here I'm trying to draw the nostril shape. So there's the inner part, the darker part of the nostril, but then there's also the outer part that surrounds it, that goes around the edge. So here I'm trying to get that inner shape right. Draw and look, draw and look. So with observational drawing, keep stopping to see, have I drawn what I'm looking at? Is that the same shape? Is it kind of the same size? And is it the same proportions? So proportions are always about the size of one thing in relation to the size of another. And here I'm just adding in a little bit of the shadow I see, and those shadows appear as shapes. So while I'm drawing in shape, I'm also adding a little bit of shadow. Putting in the final bits of shadow here on the left hand side of the nose. There's a little bit here, which is probably a bit of shadow under the eye, and then that's my nose drawn. So you can see the ones that I'm drawing, they're not exactly the same as Frida Kahlo's, but I'm just trying to find the same shapes as she has drawn. Okay, then go down to the mouth. So with the mouth, I'm going to kind of measure where I think it starts. I always draw a mouth by drawing the very middle part of the mouth where the two lips meet. That middle line to me always gives me a good idea of the shape of the mouth. So any kind of portrait, whether I'm drawing a self-portrait or a regular portrait, I will nearly always draw that first, and I try to get that shape correct because I find that usually gives me a really good indication of the rest of the mouth. Here I have a nice strong line there, which is the kind of laughter line at the side of the mouth, from the nose down to the mouth. And I have this other little shadow here. I'm not even sure what that's called, but that shadow there is quite strong on some people. And it gives you an idea of a bit of the shape. So what I'm trying to do is draw every shape that I see. Don't think too much about what those shapes are, but draw the shapes as you see them. See even there with the upper lip, see where does it join that middle line that I've drawn? Where do those two meet each other? And try and get those shapes right. So once you've drawn that, look at the shape and see, is that close to the one I'm looking at? And then start drawing the lower lip. And you can see from my ones, none of these are an exact copy. None of them are perfect, but I'm just working on my observational skills where I'm looking and trying to draw what I see and trying to draw it as correctly as possible. So it's just an exercise to train you. Okay, and as before, if you make a mistake or draw it and find that actually I need to change that, rub it out and change it. Make your fixes now. And there's my finished one showing the three different eye, nose and mouth shapes. Now we're going to look at shadow to try and show some depth when drawing. So a great person to look at for shadow is Rembrandt. So we saw some of his work earlier. We're going to use this one as an exercise to draw shadow. So print out your handout, or if you can't print it out, have it up on screen and draw it into a frame that's similar proportions to this. So what we're going to do is just look at this portrait and try and, without looking at lines or shapes, just try and draw the shadows that we see. So when drawing shadows, there's a few things we look at. One is, how is one shadow darker than another? So what I usually do is I just start at one point and all I'm doing is shadowing around with my pencil. Okay, so I'm just trying to draw the shadows that I see. The first one that I saw that I thought would be easy to draw is the one down the side of the nose. So a little bit like shape drawing, look at what part do you think, okay, I can draw that, start with that and work from there. Okay, so you can see with this, I've drawn no guidelines. I haven't decided where different parts of the face go. I'm just trying to draw the shadow. So this might not end up being a perfectly proportioned drawing. I just want you to try and see the shadow in the Rembrandt painting and try and replicate some of that shadow in your own drawing. Okay, so one thing you will find as soon as you start drawing shadow is that some shadows are darker than others. So you might draw one part of shadow and then you try to draw one next to it and you're like, actually this one is much lighter, so I need to make my original shadow darker. So I find when doing a shadow drawing like this, you're constantly going back and forth to make one bit lighter or one bit darker than another. Okay, so what I'm trying to do is just draw everything by shading or shadowing. So it's like coloring with with a regular pencil, and try and color in all the shadow parts that I can see. And as I color in all those shadows, features, so the facial features are like your eyes, nose, mouth, features are going to start to appear. Okay, as before with the shape exercise with Frida Kahlo, all these exercises I'm giving you to do, don't worry too much about the end result. The end result is not the most important part. The most important part is that you try to do the exercise and try to concentrate on what the aim of the exercise is. And this one is looking at shadows and trying to draw those shadows in the box below. Okay, so I say it every lesson, I guess, but it's really important. Observational drawing is primarily or mostly about observation, which is looking. So you should be looking at your reference picture half the time and at your own drawing half the time. Okay, when you've got one next to each other like this, you can be looking and drawing at the same time. But you should spend a lot of time looking and trying to make sure that you're drawing exactly as you want to draw. So here I'm trying to sketch in all of the shadows that I can see in the drawing above. Okay, my drawing below is not going to be a really perfect representation of the Rembrandt painting, but I'm hoping to put the shadow in all the same places as they appear below. So now I'm just going to speed this up a little. So all I'm doing here is speeding up so you can go through this a bit quicker, and you can see that what I'm doing is drawing shadow. By drawing the shadow, I'm kind of drawing the face, I suppose, but really I'm just trying to draw on the shadow as I see it and as it appears in the Rembrandt painting. Every time I colour or sketch in one shadow, it makes me look at the shadow next to it and I start thinking, is that lighter or darker than what I've just done? So the more shadows you draw on this, the more you start comparing one shadow to another, and you might have to adjust them. What I usually find is I end up darkening up lots of shadow so that what I know is lighter stays lightest, and I darken from there up. So you can see by darkening parts of his hat and parts of his kind of clothing there in the centre, I'm kind of deciding what are the darkest parts, because I'm looking at my Rembrandt painting and they look like the darkest parts to me, so I'm trying to go, if they're dark, other parts are lighter than them, so I'm trying to go to my darkest and then work my way back to my lightest shadows. And here I'm looking at all the different bits of shade I have, including the background, and starting to kind of shade in larger areas so I can figure out what's light and what's dark. So keep in mind as you're watching this, this is sped up to 3 times speed, so it's an awful lot faster than it's even possible to work, but it's just to give you an idea of how to add in those shadows and then how to adjust them at the end. So here I'm making some of those adjustments where I'm darkening up bits around the facial features to make them pop more, but also because they're much darker in the painting. You got all these other small shadows, and sometimes you find you draw one shadow and suddenly you see a new one you didn't notice before. And I'm just fine-tuning this as I finish. So there you go, you can see at the end, it's a reasonably good shadow drawing, is that it's got lots of different tones and shadows in it. It doesn't look perfectly like the original, but it's a good exercise, and that's what I'd like you to do. So now we're going to draw a self-portrait. So here I'm working from a photograph of myself that I have on my iPad. Usually I'd work into a mirror, but because I'm drawing flat, I'm going to need to work from a photo. And first thing I do is draw the head. So draw it nice and big in your page. It's an ovalish shape, and then draw on a bit of the neck. Now I'm going to divide the head up into facial features. So halfway down the head is a line where I'm going to draw the eyes. Halfway between the eyes and the chin is a line for the nose. Halfway between the nose and the chin is a line for the mouth. So these are just measuring roughly where I think they're going to go, and that's just the center line of my face. So also between my eye line and my nose line, that's where my ears are going to go. So you can see here on my iPad, I'm going to take my original photo and I'm going to make it black and white. The reason I do that is it's a lot easier to draw a black and white image. It takes out all this extra information that I don't need, and I just see the facial features, which is what I want to draw. Now I'm going to start drawing, and what I usually draw is I look for what's the first shape that I find easy to draw. For me, it's either usually the nostrils or one of the eyes, but here I'm actually going to start with just the bridge of my glasses that goes over my nose. I'm going to kind of draw that shape in and see does it help me place anything else in my drawing. Once I get in there, I'm going to start drawing my eyes. So don't forget, halfway down the face I drew a line, and that's where my eye goes. So remember we were drawing the eye shape from Frida Kahlo's portrait. Look at your reference picture, which is the photograph I have of myself, and can you see the shape of the person's eye, of your eye? Okay. One thing to note is that the width of an eye, in between your two eyes, you have a space that is exactly the same as the width of your eye between each of your eyes. So if you have your left eye, you have a space in the middle the same width, and then you have your right eye. So here I'm just looking to try and draw the basic eye shapes that I can see. And I mentioned it a little bit earlier, they don't have to be the same. My two eyes are not the same shape. So here all I'm trying to draw is the shape of the eye, and then I'm trying to put the pupil inside. So the easiest way to do that is to look at the shape of the white on either side of the pupil. Am I leaving shapes that look like the ones I can see in the picture? Keep looking at your reference picture all the time and make sure that what you're drawing is what you're seeing. Okay, as always with observational drawing, look at what you're drawing half the time and look at your own drawing the other half the time. So look at your subject half the time and look at your drawing half the time. So here I'm just trying to get these the right shape, put them in the right place and get them the right size. And as I work, I can even change things as I go. So some people draw very sketchily to begin with, some people draw more exactly. I do kind of a mixture of both. I draw things pretty much in the right place, but I can change them at any time. And as with the drawings we've done before, it's worth remembering you can go back and change something if it's not right, and always go back and change if it's not right. Okay? Always be prepared to fix something if it's not working. Now, what I'm trying to do is draw the upper lid of the eye. Okay, so that shape, and actually I can even see as I'm drawing it there, it's not quite right, but it'll do for the moment. I think I'm probably going to fix it later on. And I'm drawing the shapes even of the shadows and the lines around the outer part of my eyes. So as you go, try and draw the shapes that you see. Remember the exercises we did earlier. We were drawing shapes and we were drawing shadow. And here you're going to draw a little bit of both as you go. So I'm just trying to get my upper eyelids right, and then draw all the other lines and shadows that I can see around. Keep in mind, I'm drawing this quite flat, so sometimes drawing flat is not ideal. If I was drawing usually, I would usually have it upright or at a bit of an angle so I could see a little better. I'm drawing flat so that I can record it, so the proportions I'm drawing are okay. They probably could be a little bit better. Here as I go, a little bit like with Frida Kahlo's, I'm drawing in little bits of the shadow as I see them and as they appear. Very quickly, because I'm drawing someone with glasses, I get to the point where I have to start drawing the glasses in. And some people hate drawing glasses. They think it's really difficult. I love drawing glasses, and the reason I love drawing glasses is because they're a really easy to draw shape. So what I find is as soon as you draw the eyes, the shape of the glasses starts getting in your way and you have to draw that shape, and it helps you create a defined shape really simply, really easily, and it gives you a really easy to identify part of the person's face. So if like me you wear glasses all the time, glasses is a way that people recognize me. So often the glasses, if you draw the glasses correctly when drawing someone, it makes them much easier to recognize. It makes it much easier to get a likeness of that person. So here I'm trying to get the glasses shape correct. I'm going to draw the first one that I can see and then try and draw the outer shape. So don't assume anything, okay? So sometimes I find when you're drawing glasses you think, oh, mine are kind of rectangular or they're kind of round. As always, take your time to look at what's there and draw what you see. I always find whenever I draw these glasses they're a much odder shape than I would think of, and I look at them every morning when I put them on. I see them every time I look in the mirror, and I find that it's only when I draw them that I look at them really, really closely. So with observational drawing, you often are looking at things more closely than you ever usually would. And that includes your own face. Often there's parts you don't notice, no matter how often you look in the mirror, and when you're doing a self-portrait of yourself, whether it be from a picture or in the mirror, you're looking so closely that you will see things you don't usually see. I definitely see an awful lot more lines under my eyes than I know are there, and my hair is always much messier than I understand it to be. So here now I'm just putting on the shapes that I can see, which is my glasses. So I'm putting in my glasses and I'm putting in my eyebrows. So I'm just trying to make sure I'm keeping things balanced, keeping an eye on my reference picture or my subject. So either I'm going to be looking in the mirror or I'm going to be looking at a photo of myself for the self-portrait, and trying to get the shapes right. So use the shape drawing skills you've been building up and try and draw in what you can see. You can see here I'm drawing a little dark shape that I see on the corner. I'm not actually even sure what that is. In all observational drawing, you should be drawing what you see rather than what you know is there. And occasionally when you draw in items like this, so I'm drawing in the rest of my glasses, I'm going to get to a point here where I can see that when I'm trying to draw the top of my glasses, something isn't working here. And what it is that the part that goes over the bridge of my nose, I've made that too low. So I'm going to rub that out and put that back where it should be. So often as you get further into your drawing, you might notice a mistake you made earlier. Rub it out and change it. Fix as you go along. So here, by moving that bit up, I now have the top of my glasses coming from the right point, and the shape should be more correct. So every time you see something that's not working or you realize it's in the wrong place, move it. Try and fix it. Okay? So try and fix as you go, or sometimes you come back to a point and realize something's in the wrong place. Fix it as soon as you see it. The sooner you fix it, the easier it's going to be. So you can see as I'm drawing here, I'm adding in little bits of shadow as I go. And the reason I do that is I draw things as I see them. So with the observational drawing, you're trying to draw what you see. I draw in the shadow as I go because I find that it helps me to place items. So for me, shadows often come in shapes, or I can see them as shapes. So I find by drawing in that shape, I then now know where to place the next part. So for me, I find this a much easier way to do it. Some people prefer to draw an entire face and then add the shadow afterwards. I find this usually, for me, creates much more accurate drawings. So now I'm going to skip forward a little bit to where I'm working on the nose. So with the nose, remember what we were doing with Frida Kahlo, where we look for the nostril shapes. So look very clearly for the nostril shapes. You will nearly always be able to see someone's nostrils unless their face is pointing really low down, so they're looking down. And I find that the nostril shapes give you a really good indication of the nose. So I usually draw the dark insides of the nostrils and then the surrounding bits around them. And you can see as I'm drawing, I'm adding in shadow as I go. And the shadow is just to give us a bit of definition, but it also kind of tells us there's a little bit of depth there that it goes in. And there I am drawing the other nostril, adding in little bits of shade. And sometimes people think there's a way to draw a nose. You can see what I'm doing here is I'm just trying to draw what I can see, look for the shapes around the nostrils first, and then draw the other shadows that appear around them. So you can see here to the right hand side of the nose is quite a big shadow. So what I would always do is draw that in really soon. And the reason it's such a big shadow is your nose sticks out quite a bit. So you get more shadow where there's depth going in on your face and where there's something protruding out, which is your nose because it sticks out. Because you've been doing shape drawing exercises, you can see instead of thinking about how does the shadow under the nose look, just look and see what shape is it making. So look for the shapes all the time. Every time you see something slightly complicated, look at it and say, is there a shape in there that I can see and that I find easy to draw? And draw that shape and then work your way around. And now I'm going to start looking at the mouth. So if you remember when we were drawing Frida Kahlo, I talked about I like to draw the centre of the mouth where the two lips meet first. I find that shape usually gives me a very good representation of what a person's mouth shape looks like. So I always start in the middle and then look at what's the upper lip shape and what's the lower lip shape. You can see the upper lip shape I'm drawing here, so I'm shading it a little bit as I go and trying to draw the shape as I can see it in my photograph. Okay. But you may find if you're drawing from a mirror where you're drawing yourself while looking at yourself, you'll find you're probably making some faces as you draw. I make a lot of faces when I draw, so that's okay. Just try and make sure you keep roughly the same pose throughout the whole drawing. So here I'm trying to get the two lips, the upper lip and the bottom lip, add in a bit of shading, and you can see there's some shading under the lip. And actually it doesn't even touch the bottom of the bottom lip, there's kind of a little gap, and then the shading there, and that shading is where the bottom of the lip goes in before the chin starts to come back out. So all of the bits of shadow on a face are to do with parts going in and out and depth on the face. So here I've sped it up a little bit, so as I continue to draw, it's gone a little bit faster. And you can see from this here that I'm adding a bit of shading underneath the chin. And that is, if looking at that right now, I can see one really large dark shadow under the chin, and I'm doing that to help me draw and define the bottom of the face. So a little bit like some of the shape drawings we've done already, drawing in a shape or a shadow often describes the thing around it. Okay, you can see as well I get to a certain point and I need to start drawing in, I need to start shading in my glasses. By leaving them open, they look a little odd, so I'm starting to try and get everything to look a little bit like my reference picture or my own photo of myself. So I'm going to shade these in just so that I'm starting to get the balance of what's shaded and what's not. I jumped a little bit and I've started to draw in a little bit of the kind of dark shadow around the side of my face and some of the shape of my face. So you can see as I'm drawing this side of the face, I'm starting to add in more of the shadows that I see. The more that you look at your picture, the more you're going to see. So you're going to see more variations of shades, so some bits lighter, some bits darker, and drawing those shadows in is going to help you draw parts of your portrait. So here I'm just using that shading to describe bits of the neck and to show what parts are dark. Okay. Keep in mind this is double speed, so this is going much faster than I draw. I'm also using a piece of paper here, you can see a piece of paper folded up that I'm drawing on top of, and that is helping to make sure that I don't rub my pencil below, so that I don't end up rubbing up my little finger and making it messy. I'm trying to get the shape of my face about right, and now I'm trying to draw on my ears. So when I see my ears from this angle, they look nothing like an ear as we know it. So this is where drawing shapes and observational drawing, which is drawing what you see, really comes in. Just try to draw what you see. Forget what it is you're drawing and just draw the shapes that you see. Here I'm drawing in some of what is part of my clothing, and in doing this I can see this is going to be one of the darkest parts of my drawing. Okay, so that's going to be dark. I'm wearing a black cardigan. I'm going to shade that in, and then I'm also shading in and drawing in other parts that I can see there. Okay, and shade those in nice and strong. So as always with observational drawing, you're drawing what you see. So any detail that I can see, I'm sketching in. Anything I can't see, I'm just shading. So you can see here, I can see a little bit of detail of a necklace around my neck and a lighter shade of a dress. But my cardigan, I can only see dark, so I'm just shading that in all dark. Anytime you find yourself wondering what something is that you can't see, don't make it up. Just draw what it is you can't see and don't worry about the detail. Okay, observational drawings are always best if you draw exactly what you see, even if it doesn't make a lot of sense to you. You will end up with a much more accurate drawing. So you can see here I'm going to draw the ear on the right hand side of my drawing there, which is the left hand side of my face. And I can't see very much of that ear, I just can see a few shapes. So what I'm doing is I'm looking and I'm just going to draw the shapes that I can see. Then not one of those shapes looks like an ear, but when I put them all together and shade them in as I see them, it's going to look like an ear from the front. Okay, so when people talk about how to draw hands, how to draw ears, how to draw things they find difficult, observational drawing kind of fixes that for you, because you just draw what you see. You're not making anything up. You can see here, I'm just fixing one of my eyebrows. When I looked at it again, I realized it was a little bit too wide, and I'm measuring the width of that eyebrow in relation to the glasses underneath, okay? And here I'm just darkening up some parts of my drawings that are much darker and stronger in the original photograph, so around the eyes, the nostrils, and I'm trying to create some darker shadows where I can see them. If I see something that I think is not working or I think is the wrong shape, rub it out and fix it. Okay, always be ready to fix your drawings. So here I'm just fine-tuning a bit before I move on to doing my hairline and the rest of the shadow on the side of my face. So here you can see I'm just checking parts of the drawing to make sure I have the shadows I think I want and the shapes of everything are about correct. And then I'm going to start on my hairline. So with my hairline, I'm just trying to draw what I can see, which is very little. So from the front, when I've got my hair tied back like this, you don't see an awful lot. You'll see some of the bits of flyaway hair around my forehead and the little bit that I have tied back at the top. As with all kinds of observational drawing, you don't need to draw an awful lot. You can see here I don't need to draw an awful lot, and it gives you a good idea of my hair, how it's tied back, and the style of it. Okay, yet there's not very much there. So always try to draw exactly what you see, and the more you draw what you see, the more correct the final drawing should be. I'm putting a little bit of shadow in the side of the forehead that I can see there. And now I need to start looking and see, do I think I have this right? I can see I've added a little bit onto the jawline there, so I'm trying to fix that a little bit. I'm not sure how well I fixed it, but I changed it very slightly there. I'm going to add back in the little bits of hair and ear that I had there. And what I'm trying to do is trying to fix where I can see mistakes. When I look at the eyes there, I think I may have drawn them a little bit small, and I've also drawn them a little too dark around the outside, so I'm going to try and fix that. So here I am drawing a little bit wider, also making my my eyelids a little bit heavier because I think I might have made them too thin, and try and fix bits that I thought were a little bit wrong. So it's always worth taking the time to rub something out if you're sure that it's not right, and it's sometimes a thing you only notice at the very end. So for me, I was pretty sure that the eyes, I'd drawn them a little bit too small and that I'd made the lines around them too heavy. So I'm trying to redraw them a little bit lighter and a tiny bit bigger. So it's a very small difference, but it's definitely closer to the ones in the photograph. And then once I have them drawn in, I just make sure that I redo my shadows and then take a look at my portrait and see if that is any closer to what I think I see. See here, I'm just adding little bits of shadow, maybe darkening up the pupils a little bit. And it's really hard to make sure that you don't overdo something. So you have to just get to a point where you think this is enough, I think I'm done. Here I'm just taking a final overall look. Keep in mind again, this is still double speed. I'm just making sure that I've added enough shadow and that my features are standing out enough. So that by the end, I have a portrait that I think looks a little bit like me. It's not a great likeness actually, but that has most of the shadows and shapes that I'm looking for. So here's my self-portrait, and we're going to look at some ones by famous artists. This is one by Henri Matisse, the French post-impressionist painter who did lots of paper cutouts but also was a fantastic painter. This is one by Paul Gauguin, another post-impressionist painter, and he often did ones with backgrounds like this that were based on Japanese prints. This is one by John Yates, who was the father of Jack B. Yates and William Butler Yeats and did a lot of portraits of them, but these are two self-portraits of his. This is a self-portrait by Vera Clute, who's a contemporary Irish painter, and she does amazing portraits and the sculpture of Luke Kelly's head, which is in Dublin. This is a self-portrait by Edvard Munch, who's better known for his painting The Scream, so this is the Norwegian artist. And the final one is a really famous self-portrait by Vincent van Gogh, and he did a number of self-portraits which would be very well known. So now it's up to you, so take your time, use what you learned in the two exercises, the shape and the shadows, and take the time to draw your own portrait. Look forward to seeing them.